It was a quiet night when Audrey stood in the doorway of the kitchen. I could see the seriousness in her eyes, the kind of look someone gives when they've already made up their mind but still want to seem noble about it. I had just finished rinsing the last of the dinner plates, and as I dried my hands, I turned to face her. "Scott, can we talk?" she said softly. Her voice had that gentle, almost rehearsed tone, but there was something beneath it that made my stomach tighten. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Sure. What's on your mind?" Audrey hesitated, took a deep breath, and then dropped the bomb. "I need to take one last trip with my ex before we get married." The words hung in the air for a moment, and I had to force myself to pretend I was processing them slowly. But inside, my pulse was already quickening. "A trip? With your ex? For what?" She looked at me, her eyes darting around as if she were searching for the right words. "For closure, Scott. We both have things from our past that we've carried for a long time. I can't move forward in our marriage with all of that unresolved. We just need to talk one last time. Nothing more." I stood there, holding my breath, watching her every movement. There was a calmness in her voice, but something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I just watched her eyes, the way they flitted around, unable to stay still. I had a bad feeling in my gut, but I didn't let it show. "Where exactly are you going?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the rising tension in my chest. "There's this little town near Lake Tahoe, a place we used to go when we were together," she explained. "It'll just be for the weekend. 2 nights. I'll be back Sunday evening." Her words were too smooth, too perfect. This wasn't a decision that had been made tonight. It had been planned for weeks. I remembered the late nights when she'd been at work, the times I'd caught her hiding her phone screen, the smiles she'd shared with someone who wasn't me. "If that's what you think you need, then do it," I said, my voice almost mechanical. "I want you to be ready for this marriage, not unsure." Audrey's shoulders relaxed, and she gave me a soft smile, the kind that made me want to believe everything she was saying. "Thank you, Scott. I knew you'd understand. You're always so mature about things." I gave her a tight smile, trying to keep calm. "When do you leave?" "Friday morning," she said. I already took the time off from work. Of course she had. I picked up my glass of water, taking a long sip to calm the nerves that were quickly rising. "Well, I hope you get the closure you're looking for," I said, my words casual, even though something inside me was screaming. I knew, in that moment, that the wedding wasn't real anymore. She just didn't know it yet. The next morning, Audrey left for work like everything was normal. The house felt strangely quiet, almost empty, but my mind was racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and I couldn't just sit idly by. I had to do something. I spent the next few hours planning, not out of anger, but out of a need for clarity. The first thing I did was protect my finances. We had a shared account for wedding expenses, but most of the money in it was from my savings. I logged in and moved my contributions into a private account under my name, leaving a note in the transaction details, temporary balance adjustment. The next step was to take care of the vendors. The reception hall, the florist, the catering, everything was booked. I called each one, explaining that we might have to change the date. I asked if they could keep our contracts under a corporate event title to avoid suspicion, but I made sure that my deposit stayed safe. Every conversation ended the same way. "Thank you for your flexibility, Mr. Thompson." Step 3 was legal. I called my lawyer, Andrea Price, the same one who had helped me when I bought the house. She answered quickly. "Roger, what's going on?" she asked, sensing something was wrong. "I need to know how to handle someone living in my property who's no longer welcome," I said evenly. She didn't ask for details. "You're still engaged, right?" "Not for long," I replied flatly. Andrea explained what I needed to do. Since Audrey wasn't on the deed, I could simply give her a formal notice to vacate. She promised to draft the document and email it to me within the week. By the time Audrey came home that evening, cheerful and talkative as usual, I had everything set in motion. She sat down to tell me about her day, and I listened, all the while feeling a sense of detachment grow between us. At dinner, she said, "I was thinking about taking the old highway down to Lake Tahoe. It's a prettier drive." "That sounds nice," I said, nodding. "You should enjoy the scenery." She smiled and touched my arm. "I knew you'd understand." I smiled back, but it wasn't genuine. I always do. As she continued to pack for her trip, I felt the calmness settle over me, though it wasn't a peace I was used to. It was the calm before a storm that I knew was coming. The next few days were crucial. I had a plan, and I was going to follow through with it. Friday morning arrived too quickly. Audrey was already up and out of the house by 6:30 a.m., leaving without so much as a glance back. I watched her go, feeling a strange emptiness fill the space where her presence once seemed to matter. As the car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my phone, quickly firing off a text to Mike, the private investigator I had hired the day before. "She's on her way. Keep me posted." I typed, then hit send. My heart was heavy with what I had to do next, but there was no turning back now. While Audrey thought she was embarking on a quest for closure, I was already preparing for the end of something much bigger than just our engagement. The wedding plans, the life we had been building together, it was all unraveling. And I couldn't ignore the truth that was glaring me in the face. I spent the next few hours organizing everything I could. The legalities, the finances, and the vendors were all taken care of. But there was still one thing left to do: confirm what I suspected. I had to have proof. Mike was a meticulous man, quiet and precise, the kind of person who didn't waste words. By noon, I received another message from him. It was short and to the point. "Got them. Heading south. We'll update tonight." I felt a wave of relief, mixed with a knot of dread. The truth was out there, and soon I'd have it all in black and white. At 3 p.m., I received an email. It was from Mike. I opened it, my eyes scanning the photos. The first shot showed Audrey and Dave standing on a dock, sunlight casting long shadows over the water. Their hands brushed against each other. The second shot was at a seafood cafe, Audrey laughing, her hand resting on Dave's as they shared a glass of wine. The final image sealed everything. It was taken at a small coastal inn where they checked in together. The sign behind them read Bay View Harbor Suites. Audrey's smile wasn't forced, not in the slightest. It was a smile that felt familiar. But what really stopped me cold was the final detail. Below the images, Mike had included a few short notes. Time, place, date, and then, the kicker, Dave's wedding ring. He was married. I felt a sharp pang of betrayal, but I couldn't let myself get lost in the emotion. I had to stay calm. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I wasn't just going to let Audrey walk back into my life and pretend everything was fine. Not after this. I spent the next few hours gathering everything I would need to confront her. The photos, the receipts, the proof. It was all right there in front of me. By 6 p.m., Audrey called. She was excited, almost giddy. "Hey, love, I just wanted to check in. This trip, it's been so helpful. I feel so much lighter, like I've really moved forward. I'm going to head back tomorrow night, but I miss you." I held my breath for a moment, then replied, "I'm glad you're getting what you need, Audrey. Drive safe. I'll be here when you get back." I ended the call and set the phone down, my mind already racing through the next steps. She thought everything was fine. She thought she had found closure. But all I could think was how to break the illusion. The next day, I met with Mike one more time. He handed me the final piece of the puzzle, a receipt from the inn. It listed both Audrey and Dave's names, confirming what I had suspected all along. With everything in hand, I felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't anger I felt anymore. It was clarity. The wedding was over. Our relationship was over. It was time to move on. Sunday evening came, and Audrey returned home. She was smiling, carrying the same energy she had on the phone the night before. "Rog, I feel so much better. That trip was everything I needed," she said, practically glowing. I stood in the living room, arms crossed, watching her. "That's great, Audrey. I'm glad you're feeling lighter," I said, my voice cold. She gave me a look, sensing something wasn't quite right. "Is something wrong?" "Not really. I just have something for you," I replied, gesturing toward the coffee table. Audrey's smile faltered as she saw the brown folder sitting there. She picked it up, opened it, and froze. The first photo was of her and Dave at the dock. The next photo, of them at the cafe, laughing. And the last photo, of them at the inn, checking in together. Her face drained of color as she stared at the evidence in front of her. "Where did you get these?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I had someone follow you, Audrey," I said evenly. "I wanted to be sure of what you meant by closure." She closed the folder slowly, tears welling in her eyes. It's not what it looks like. We just talked, I swear. Talk, I said, my voice rising slightly. In a king-size bed? With him. Audrey's gaze dropped to the floor. She was silent for a moment before speaking again, her voice breaking. Scott, please. I was confused. I just needed to be sure about us. I slid another sheet of paper across the table. That's your signature, Audrey. Don't lie to me again. She put her hands over her face and started to cry. It was a mistake. I made a huge mistake. Please don't do this. I stood up, walking to the door and opening it wide. You made your choice, Audrey. I'm just giving you the closure you asked for. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she picked up her bag and left without a word. The door clicked shut behind her, and I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence that now filled the house. The chaos was over. The storm had passed. All that was left, the days after Audrey left, felt strange. The house, once filled with her presence, was now eerily quiet. I went through the motions, going to work, making coffee in the morning, returning home to an empty space, but nothing felt normal. The weight of what had happened settled heavily on my shoulders. By Monday morning, the phone calls began. At first, it was Audrey, her name flashing on my phone repeatedly, but I didn't pick up. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to hear her explain herself again. Each message she left was filled with desperation, apologies, and promises that things could be fixed, that we could still make it work. But I knew better. The truth was clear now, and no amount of begging would change it. By noon, I received a text message from her. It was almost identical to the ones she had left me earlier. Please, Scott, can we talk? I made a mistake. I panicked. We can fix this. Don't throw everything away. I read it, then set the phone down, my hands trembling slightly, but only from the cold realization that this was the end. Her mother, Ella, called soon after. I answered on the third ring, hearing the strain in her voice as she said, Scott, she's broken. You made your point. Ending the engagement publicly will destroy her. I could hear the desperation in Ella tone, but I remained calm. She did that herself, I said simply. I'm just stepping aside. You're being cruel, Ella replied, her voice quiet but sharp. She needs you, Scott. You owe her more than this. I sighed deeply. I'm not being cruel. I'm being clear. Then, without another word, I hung up. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Victor, Audrey's father. His voice came through, hard and full of anger. If you embarrass my daughter, Scott, I'll make sure you regret it. I almost smiled at the absurdity of it. I guess we'll both have busy weekends, I replied evenly before hanging up. The phone calls didn't stop after that. By Wednesday, the tone had shifted again. Audrey was desperate, but this time she was trying a new tactic. She showed up at my office building unannounced, waiting outside in the parking lot. I saw her from the window, standing in the sunlight with a defeated posture. She looked different now, tired, pale, as if the weight of everything was crashing down on her. When I stepped outside to meet her, I could see that she had been crying. She wiped her eyes quickly, trying to hide it. Scott, please don't make this worse. At least come to the engagement dinner. My parents have already paid for everything. People expect us to be there. It's not just about us anymore. It's about our families, about what we promised. I studied her for a long moment, watching her plea. Finally, I gave a small nod. All right, I said quietly. I'll be there. But it's time everyone sees the truth for themselves. Her eyes brightened for a brief moment, relief flashing across her face. She didn't understand what I meant, but she believed she had won something. She was wrong. When she left, I immediately picked up the phone and called a restaurant. I spoke with the manager, arranging for a few changes to the evening. It wasn't going to be a celebration, not by any means. It was going to be something else entirely. Saturday evening came, and the restaurant's private room was set. I arrived early and quietly slipped into the back of the room, unnoticed by the guests. Audrey was already there, working the crowd with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her parents were close behind, greeting everyone, pretending everything was fine. But I knew better. As the evening went on, Ella stood up to give a toast. To love that endures, she said with a smile, raising her glass. To forgiveness and to new beginnings, she continued, glancing over at me and then at Audrey. Because true love always finds its way back. Polite applause followed, and everyone glanced between me and Audrey, waiting for my reaction. I stood up slowly, taking my time to let the room settle into silence. I raised my glass, giving a small nod to Eleanor before speaking. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady and calm. "And thank you all for coming." I paused, letting the room quiet before continuing. Audrey once told me she needed a trip with her ex before marrying me for closure. She promised it was innocent. It wasn't. The room froze. Audrey's face went pale, and she looked at me with wide, panicked eyes. I set my glass down on the table and pulled an envelope from my jacket. Inside this envelope are photos and receipts. I'm not sharing them publicly, but Audrey, your parents, and I know exactly what's in them. That's enough. Audrey's voice broke. "Scott, stop, please." She was begging now, her voice barely audible. I looked at her calmly. "I'm not angry. I'm just done." With that, I handed the envelope to her father, Victor. He took it, staring at it like it was a live wire, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. I stood there for a moment, watching them, before walking toward the door. The sound of chairs scraping and murmurs of shock filled the room behind me. I walked out slowly, every step deliberate. Behind me, I could hear Audrey's sobs, but I didn't look back. The following days were a blur. The moment I left the engagement dinner, I knew there was no turning back. Audrey's world had crumbled in front of her, and now, everything was out in the open. But there was no satisfaction in that. I didn't feel relief, only a strange emptiness. By Monday morning, the fallout had already begun. Audrey's calls kept coming, relentless and full of desperation, but I ignored them. I couldn't bring myself to answer, not when I knew there was nothing left to say. She texted me at least 10 times, each message more urgent than the last. "Please, Scott, we can fix this. I made a mistake. It was just a trip, I swear." But I didn't reply. She didn't understand. This wasn't about fixing things. It was about the truth. And the truth had already come to light. Then came the text from her friends, particularly from her closest one, Stephanie. She messaged me later that afternoon. "She's a mess, Scott. She hasn't left her parents' house since Saturday night. I've never seen her like this." I stared at the message, but I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say. Audrey had made her choice, and I had made mine. By Wednesday, things only escalated. I received a call from her father, Victor, who was livid. His voice was loud and filled with anger. "If you embarrass my daughter any further, Scott, I will make sure you regret it. You have no idea what you're doing." I stayed calm, even though part of me wanted to snap back. "I guess we'll both have busy weekends then," I said coolly before ending the call. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even upset. I was just done. I had given Audrey everything she needed to see the truth, and now the consequences were hers to bear. Later that week, I heard from Andrea, my lawyer. The formal notice to remove Audrey from my property had been finalized. She was legally obligated to vacate the premises in 30 days, and all her things had already been packed up and moved to the guest room. I didn't have the energy to deal with it directly. The truth was, I didn't want to see her again. Not until the very end. It wasn't until Friday afternoon that I heard from Audrey again. She came by the house, unannounced. I knew she would. There was no way she could let go without trying one last time to change my mind. She stood in front of the door, her face pale and tired. "Scott, please," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm broken. I don't know what came over me. I made a huge mistake. You can't just throw everything away. We can fix this. We can still fix us." I looked at her for a moment, my expression unchanged. "No, Audrey, it's too late. You made your choice when you went on that trip. You chose him over me. And now it's over." She began to cry, her face crumpling with the weight of her guilt. "Please," she sobbed, "don't do this. I love you. I'm sorry. I just needed answers. I needed closure." "Closure?" I said, my voice steady but cold. "You had your closure when you got back, but it wasn't the kind you expected. I'm giving you the closure you wanted, Audrey, but it's not going to be what you hoped for." I took a step back, motioning toward the door. "You need to leave. You have 30 days to pack your things and get out." She didn't move at first. For a long moment, she just stood there, eyes filled with tears. Then, slowly, she picked up her bag and walked out the door without another word. I stood there for a while after she left, the silence of the house pressing down on me. It was over. Finally, it was done. The next few days were quieter. No more calls. No more messages. It was as though Audrey had disappeared. But I knew better. The fallout had just begun. By Monday morning, news of what had happened at the engagement dinner had already spread. Stephanie texted me again, this time with a different tone. Audrey's barely left her room, Scott. She's not the same person anymore. She's lost everything. And then, it wasn't just Audrey who was feeling the heat. Word about her affair with Dave spread like wildfire, and soon enough, his wife found out. From what I heard, Daniel's wife, Melissa, had seen the photos from the dinner through a friend, and by the end of the week, Daniel had moved out of their home. His marriage was over before Audrey's could even begin. As for Audrey, she seemed to disappear from the world entirely. I heard through Stephanie that she quit her job, that her co-workers were whispering about her. She moved into a small rental near her parents' house and kept to herself. From what I gathered, she barely left her apartment. The woman who once spoke about emotional growth, who talked about moving forward and healing, was now living behind closed blinds. She had tried to move forward, but in the end, she was the one who was trapped by her own choices. I never saw Audrey again after that. Months passed, and I continued with my life. I focused on my work, my routine, and the small sense of peace that came from knowing I had done the right thing, even if it hurt. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Then, one evening, months later, I ran into Audrey by chance at the grocery store. She was standing in the aisle, her eyes downcast, holding a basket with only a few items in it. She looked older somehow, thinner. When our eyes met, she tried to smile, but it faltered before she could even get it fully out. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. She simply nodded, and I nodded back. That night, I went home to the same kitchen where it had all started. The kitchen where Audrey had asked for closure. And in the end, that's exactly what she got. Just not the kind she expected. And me? I didn't need a trip. I didn't need closure from her. I just needed the truth. The house felt calm again, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with myself. The days after running into Audrey at the grocery store felt surreal. It was as if the encounter had closed a chapter that had remained open for far too long. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't even feel sad. There was just an overwhelming sense of finality. It was over. I moved on. I had to. I couldn't afford to keep looking back at what could have been, at the life I thought I would have had with Audrey. She had made her choice, and now I had to live with mine. As time passed, I went through the motions of life with a sense of detached calm. I continued working at the same job, seeing the same people, living in the same house. But something had changed. A part of me, the part that had always believed in the future we were building together, had died. And though I could never bring that part of me back, I realized that I could still rebuild. That realization came slowly, quietly, like the sound of a door closing softly behind me. A few months later, I was sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but then something inside me made me pick up. "Hello," I said, trying to sound casual, though a small part of me knew who it was. "Scott, it's me. Audrey." Her voice came through, shaky and quiet. It had been months since I'd last heard from her, and hearing her voice again made something stir deep inside me. But I pushed it down, refusing to let it take hold. "What do you need, Audrey?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. I need to talk," she said. Her voice cracked, and I could hear the desperation in it. "Please, Scott. I know it's been a long time, but I need closure. I need to explain." "Explain?" I asked, my heart rate quickening. "You've had plenty of time for explanations, Audrey. You had your chance to explain when you chose him over me." "I know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what I was thinking. I was confused. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you." I stayed silent for a moment, thinking. It was clear to me now that she hadn't changed, not really. She still hadn't fully faced the consequences of her actions. She still wanted me to give her something, some sense of redemption, some way to make things right. But I was done with that. I had given her all the chances in the world, and she had thrown them away. Audrey, I can't help you anymore. I moved on. I've let go, I said, the words feeling strange but freeing as they left my mouth. What you did wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, and that choice led us here. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter, but I can't go back, and I don't want to. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her breath catch, and I knew she was struggling to find the right words. But I didn't need her to say anything more. I had made my decision, and it was final. I know, she said quietly, after what seemed like an eternity. I'm sorry, Scott. I'll always regret what I did. I hope you find peace, Audrey, I said, the words coming out softer than I intended. But I can't be part of your journey anymore. Not after everything that's happened. I hung up the phone without another word, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. That night, I sat in the kitchen, looking out the window as the sun set. The house was quiet, peaceful. It had been a long, hard journey to get here, but I had finally found the peace I was searching for. No more looking over my shoulder. No more wondering about what could have been. Audrey had found her own closure, and I had found mine. It hadn't come the way I had hoped or imagined, but it had come nonetheless. The truth was a funny thing. It wasn't always what we wanted to hear, but it was always what we needed to hear. And now I could move on. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. The next chapter of my life was waiting to be written, and I was ready to start it.